Yeah, this is Sam on the Street, but with a special new series for you called Perch Perfect. This is the very first episode, so bear with me as we kind of figure out how we're going to do this. But I'm here with our very first guest, our first volunteer, and we appreciate him for that. Gremnir, why don't you tell everybody who you are, what's going on? Of course, I call you Gremnir, but I know that's not your real name. But
it's a chosen one either way. One.
Okay. So why don't you just tell, who are you? What are you here
for? My name is Gremnir. I am a classically trained cellist, composer. Got my training here at Cal State East Bay and from years 2010 to 2016 for bachelor's and master's studies. I make music, I guess you could call it traditional folk music, but a popular name for it is Nordic Folk, and has a dark, cinematic, ancient aesthetic, kind of like what you might hear in the shows like Vikings or The Last Kingdom or the Northman film. I'm also a session musician. I record string parts for musicians and songwriters around the globe. Have a few collaborations in the works with such folks, and I'm also trying to get my stuff placed in film, television, digital media, all that stuff, and getting active in the synchronization licensing community in that way. Been going to some conferences in LA and other parts of California for a few years now. So, yeah, I think that covers most of it. Generally speaking, before all those, I'm a human being, just like all of you. Prioritizing compassion and kindness as we navigate a nightmarish hellscape.
Fair enough. I feel like a lot of our viewers would get you. But this is the kind of music you play, you say, oh, it's in all these shows, but I feel like if you go out in the world, you're not just going to hear this kind of Nordic folk kind of sound. I mean, what drew you to making this specific type of music?
It brings me joy. I've had a fascination with ancient sounding music ever since my graduate studies here. It was something I wish we had more of, but the furthest back in time we went was the music of medieval and Renaissance Spain. And that was when we had kind of like the Western and Eastern intellectual hub of being in Barcelona, I believe it was. But that was like the intellectual hub where people would come and talk to each other, exchange ideas, and have cultural exchange. Then Catherine the Great happened, and she said, well, if you're a Spanish citizen, you're now a Catholic. Everyone else, get out. So before that, I think other places that were like intellectual hubs were Afghanistan, somewhere in there, and then navigated around after that. But something I always wanted to learn more about was that course that I took here had a blend of stuff that was both written music, primarily in the Catholic Church, because they were the people that had the resources for that kind of thing to happen. And then we had studied a few of the secular pieces, and I mean very few of the secular pieces that lived from that time. All they had was words, and then the music was basically improvised from people that would perform this music in the streets, because the church had their stuff, everyone else had theirs. And because not many people knew how to write back then, they didn't write these things down. So I was very curious as to what that music might sound like, which drew me to Jordi Savall, who is an Italian or Spanish composer and arranger who has the Jordi Savall Ensemble. They use traditional instruments from that time period and try to perform in ways similar to what we understand from that time period. So after hearing about that course, I was like, man, I would like to know more about this stuff. However, I don't know where to look. So a couple years later, I started finding places and people to listen to. One of which, I would say the person or the artist that got me first into that deep dive was my favorite living singer, who I've met twice, named Ivar Pálsdóttir. She's from the Faroe Islands, which is north of the British Isles by about a couple hundred miles northwest, I believe. And then seeing who she was collaborating with, who kind of were in this traditional Scandinavian Nordic folk vein. Which included bands like Vardruna, which is headed by Einar Selvik and several of his friends and collaborators, which led me to seeing another group, Heilung, which They're taking a little hibernation right now, but they're a band that essentially takes both traditional instruments and also inscriptions on pieces of pottery and old coins, and putting that to music using traditional instruments. Like there's tagelharpas, which is like a three-stringed version of a cello, only instead of holding it between your legs, you kind of hold it on your knee to the side and bow like this. But it has three strings, two drums, and kind of one melodic string. Nyckelharpa, which is like the pianist's violin, a violin that basically has keys that you press along the neck to get the notes to change, as well as lots of percussion and drums and different types of throat singing, primarily Mongolian. I can do kargyra, and I'm learning to do sigat right now, which is basically holding a fundamental tone and then moving the mouth as you sing to effectively sing overtones over that fundamental note. Sigat, kargyra, kargyra is kind of the deep, resonant version of that, very growly. I like that. But so kind of diving into all these different old ways of making music, and also in a way studying indigenous cultures and giving credit where credit's due, because like none of this stuff is started with me. It started with others, and I'm just making my own voice, as most artists do, from all those juxtaposed pieces.
Kind of sounds like musical archaeology, like getting these pieces together, and you're like, okay, and like making a bigger, complete picture. Like maybe this is what it sounds like, or my take on it, like bringing something from the past and like bringing it to modern day, and like how does this kind of fit, you think?
I would say it's adjacent to that. I would say it's keeping fading parts of history alive as long as we can, because there's a lot that we can learn from history in both like historical events, but also little things. Instruments, singing styles, ways of telling stories. Not all story has a moral or an underlying message. Some stories just are. And we can take whatever truth we can from those and just apply that to our day-to-day things. So, and also being culturally conscious and sensitive to these things as well.
Well, is that what makes it special? Like the storytelling for you, the ability, because I know, Scandinavia, but their storytelling is like ancient. They've been doing it for centuries. These stories that they tell generation to generation. Is that kind of what drew you to it? Makes it special?
Yeah, Scandinavia has a pretty unique history with the spread of Christianity, because contrary to most of Europe, like Scandinavia, for those of us who are at home not really sure what that is, that's like Norway, Sweden, Finland, the greater like northern parts. Theirs was a bit of a blend of starting with conquering, as far as Christians coming and getting rid of the traditional gods, like the Norse pantheon, Odin, Thor, Freya, Loki, all the names that most people have heard of by this point. But slowly over time, there's a bit of a misconception as to how Christianity became like the adopted religion up there. And it wasn't from Christians coming in and conquering everybody. It was slowly over time people started accepting Christianity up there. That said, today, my understanding is that some folks in Norway, Finland, all those places, they don't exactly have a national religion of Christianity. I would say more so their old gods, their old traditions and faiths are just as alive as they were a few centuries ago, because they refer to those gods a bit more often than they do, say, the Abrahamic God or Yahweh. So as far as that's concerned, keeping history alive with the traditional things, because most of us or many of us are familiar with biblical stories, or if we're not, we're probably getting acquainted with them. Some of us are completely ignorant of them, and that's all of those are okay. But I hope that answers your question with keeping history alive, because I know Norse mythology got exceedingly popular, especially since the Lord of the Rings films came out. Right. Very close, near and dear to my heart. I love those films and stories too.
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, your question was about the story down by a guy named Snorri Sturluson, who was a Christian priest and was over time accumulating these stories and telling them as best as he could from memory. So there are some parallels that we see in those stories to what we see in the Bible. So we have to just kind of take his word for it and work with what's given. But of course, scholars are finding new stuff every day, so the information is changing over time. But those stories are staying alive by other artists like me who are on the other side of the world, and there are even a couple here in the States that are doing their own modern takes on these stories, whether it's through using the gods themselves or their interpretation of those gods, and then performing them live and resonating with people, because there's something nice, I would say comforting, about looking back in history and appreciating it in a new light. So
Yeah,
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm total, everybody that knows me knows I love history, so this is like, I totally understand. And one thing that you mentioned that I'm thinking of, when they'll see that once you start playing your music, it's very melodic. You can listen to it while studying or while writing. And everyone always has this image of like a Viking in their head, and the ram horns on the helmet, and and I know that's something that you're like, oh well, and obviously you're not. I don't see any horned helmet and all this kind of the idea of a Viking that we have versus what you think history says Vikings were.
Yeah, there are plenty of misconceptions about them. If anyone watching wants to see what the Norsemen traditionally wore in that time, I would suggest you look up the channel Grimfrost on YouTube or social media, anywhere. They sell era appropriate clothing, era accurate clothing and tools from those times. There's also folks in that part of the world who live like a Norseman from that time, kind of camps where you dress up like that person and do things that they were doing to survive in huts and houses that they built like that. So also follow the Norse Mythology podcast, Einar Selvik, all these folks to try and get a more accurate depiction of what they were. Don't use the Viking shows as your pop culture reference for what Vikings did, because they didn't dress or look like that. They might have behaved like that, but they didn't look like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've always said. I know I've seen pictures where they're all, they're like, this is what a Viking would have looked like, and it's colorful and, braided hair maybe, or.
They might have done those things.
Yeah,
they were
like,
very curious. Yeah, they were very curious and violent people. Like, no question about it. They built bridges with other countries, but they also they also chose to kill and enslave a bunch of people while they were doing that. So, keeping all those contexts in mind, or those things in mind when studying that time, I would say would help us understand their context a lot better. As far as learning Old Norse as a language, one very popular guy, an increasingly popular guy, is Jackson Crawford, who used to teach at UCLA and Berkeley, then the University of Colorado in Boulder. Now doing his own thing on YouTube and Patreon, where you can just support him when sharing information about Norse culture and language and talking to other like-minded scholars on these topics. And that's him and a couple of other people I listen to a lot when learning how to speak Old Norse.
Yeah, it sounds like inspiration comes from like a lot. Like there's these modern scholars and modern musicians, but then there's, the Old Norse and all this stuff. And so why don't we talk more about your music that you're going to play? Because I know it's based off of, the wisdom of Odin and the Old Norse poetry. So why don't you tell us more about where that comes from and, what that's going to look like?
Sure. So, like I mentioned, I'm a classically trained cellist. The Norsemen did not have cellos at that time. This was like 900 to 1200 AD. The cello was not even a dream in someone's mind yet. But all of my parts that I put in or record in my music are recorded by me, striking parts of my body, my cello, my voice, all kind of going for that organic sound. And the poetry that I use for some of these songs come from Havamal, which translates to Words of the High One, or Odin, because he has about 200 names that we know of in history. But a lot of the poetry that I use in there is my little FU to the neo-fascists that like to try and appropriate Norse culture and have been trying to do that for over 100 years now. Preaching or talking about solidarity, respect, and treating our healthy relationships with dignity and respect and thoughtfulness. He has a lot of good things to say in there. He also has a lot of weird stuff to say that did not make it into the album. So taking the best parts and just being like, these folks that are trying to appropriate this are trying to climb a rootless tree. So that's the underlying theme with many of the pieces that I have in this album. And if it doesn't have poetry from Havamal in there, it's original lyrics written in Norwegian that have to do with people who are very dear to me. Like my grandfather, for example, Sinsick, which is a piece I plan on playing today. Actually, it starts with a melody that I wrote when I was in high school and performed here for the first time, at least in the university. But the only other time I really did that publicly was at his funeral. So there's that. Motorberg, which translates to Mother Mountain, was a gift from my mom. And then Fimbulwinter Frozen Longing, which was written for someone I used to know, but kind of grabbing that cold, bitter, freezing cold feeling you kind of feel when you're in the middle, like trying to tread water in a bunch of chaos, but you're holding onto this little thing, like hope, I guess, that helps keep us going. So that's essentially it.
Well, I feel like that's kind of like you're the accumulation of everything before you. Like there's all this inspiration, but then there's this, family kind of thing. So that's, it's going to be really interesting for everyone to be able to listen to it and kind of have that in mind. But, thanks for talking to me. I think we'll just go right into, if you want to set up, and we'll just hear actually what this music sounds like.
Sure. Knust død kastet ned I dødshavet. Gråter en Gud på gravplassen. Når han strekker seg ned til helvete, finner han sangen og kaster den opp med stemme og strukker. Tabaka. Tilbaka. Tilbaka. Hon lever fremdeles. He'll die. He'll die. He'll die. He'll die. Thank you very much.
That was amazing. That was amazing. Yeah. That was so cool.
So that was Sinsig, which translates to mentally unwell. That was written in honor of my grandfather and the period of life that follows immediately after the death of a loved one. Next up, I have Fimbulwinter, Frozen Longing, which was a piece that I wrote for a friend a little over a year ago. Fimbulwinter is an event in the Norse stories that follows the death of Balder, who was the best of all of the Norse gods, the kindest and most loving. He dies because Loki effectively tricks somebody to kill him. And Fimbulwinter itself translates to Mighty Winter, a 4-year-long winter that precedes the events of Ragnarok, or the end of the world. I just gotta find it. There we go. Shh. Thank you very much. That was Fimbulwinter, Frozen Longing. A few more that I have in store for you. Motorberg, which is, as I mentioned earlier, a gift from my mother. I was raised by a single mom with the help of some family members, and deeply grateful to her and everything that she did to help bring me up right. So, let me find this up here again. Of course. All right. I'll be just singing for this one. Under fjellet regn og snø du bringer, regn på stein sildrer ned. Fra hennes overflate oppstår liv. Stø deg sammen, klippe, du står sterk og fast. Du beskytter oss fra vind og sol. Og i din skugge er jeg naken. Beskytter av henne som lever, veien er tom, likevel gir du liv. Under fjellet og dalens mor, øverst av nordisk fjell, dronning av fjelltoppene. Hvilke hemmeligheter har du delt med marken nedenfor? Hvilken bord bærer du? Bær blomstene dine vet. Beskytter av hjemmet som lever, veien er tom, likevel gir du lys. Stolt står du der, alltid stødig, tung er din byrde, likevel gir du lys. Motorberg, vi synger for Erlenna of Freyas kjærlighet, moder bør vi kjemper for deg, både vent og styrke, lenger efter vi har fått, Fader maten for oss hjem, til din som lever, som et ekko i vårt hjerte, til din som lever, som et ekko i vårt hjerte. That was Motorberg. How much time do I have left?
Got like
20 minutes. All right, cool. Okay, so we are going to just look up. I'm going to pull up the rest of the album here just because. There we go. Okay. Next up, we are going to do Ragnarok. As mentioned earlier, this was the Norsemen's prophecy of how the end of the world is going to look like. This is an Old Norse that I'll be singing in, but some excerpts from this poem called Voluspa. This was not from Havamal, it's in a separate one. But it goes into pretty excruciating detail as to what this might look like. It follows this cataclysmic weather event, Fimbulwinter. And if I were to tell the whole poem and sing it, it would probably take somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes, which I don't have today for this track, 5 or 6 minutes. But a few excerpts that I will be singing include verses such as, "The fates of all and further I see. I see a river called Slif. Its waters are sanguine red, waist deep in its depths, fight warriors of kin and rival alike. Brothers fight sisters, fathers fight their sons, mothers their daughters. And this river flows through hills of the fallen. A geyser of flame will reach up to the sky and swallow the sky with fire, and only ash will rain down." Really happy things, you know? But this is Ragnarok, or part of it anyway. The part that follows all this doom and gloom is also a promise of an era where guiltless gods will rule over what remains. The wounded will be healed, and all will be well. Befrestet men!
Så fint och fint, och värld verja, fjöld veitek froda, från säck längra, och Ragnarok, romsektima, och fällna avstan, och feiterdala, soxum och svärden, sliver heter sol, ser hon förvada, tunga strömma, männigsfara och mordvarga, och dansammarskleper, eja runo. Feithul en edavat, och ingusk edar, ord och söri, mal och meginlig es all medel foro. Rumus berjas, och hatbonen verdask, nunus sistrungar, sevil stilla, hearts oi hemi, hordomer Mikael, skakad, skalnad, skidoldir klofnir, findad, vargad, alder derald steipisk, nun end kimader, ordrum firma. Sol till sorsna, suckerfull i mar, verpa av hemni, kliver stormar, frost, eini, vid alder narra, leker orheti, vid himins jalfan, fjöld veitek fruda, fjöld seklengra, frog Ragnarok, rom sigfiva. Was Ragnarok. 10 minutes, awesome.
This closing track is the crown jewel of the album titled Hungatyr. Hungatyr translates to God of the Hanged, Odin, when he learned to harness the power of runes and bend fate to his will, a branch of Seidr magic, as which he found out he had to sacrifice himself by hanging from a tree for 9 days and 9 nights.
His number.
A significant number in Norse mythology, indicating the number of worlds that there are, all connected by the roots and branches of the world tree, Yggdrasil. But this is the story of him sacrificing himself to himself. The greatest gift that any of us can give is being our own gift to ourselves. Hangatir.
Stina Stafi. Stina Stafi. Karfari. Finnbothur. Och Gordoginregin. Och Reistrotter. Ragna. Och Reistrotter. Ragna. Fail. Urs. Valisas. Alsus. Raivo. Kalna. Kevo. Unyo. Hagalas. Lundis. Gera. Evas. Avro. Elis. Sovio. Tevas. Barkana. Tevas. Nissas. Lagus. Lagus. Lunas. Oltalan. Dagas. Oltalan. Dagas. Vinda medio netter allar nio Keiri undanur och kjeffen Odin Salfur sjálfamer og þeim meðir mangi vægs versum afrótum rönns við læfi mig saldu nevi vornigi nista ég niður nam ekka brunnar nam ekka brunnar I pandina Sleipnir, Hestermin, Gremnir, Spjotmin, Draupnir, Baukermin, Hugin, och Munen, Rafnarmen. Halvfuner, Audun, Bolverker, Bragi, Dorunder, Fraugadronten, Fjolnir, Fimboltyr, Galdrafunder, Glappspider, Antabeinir, Helmlindi, Jon Grimmer, Jornbunger, Hofnir, Runnater, Hofnir, Sigtrygge, Hofrunder, Edrerok, Halvfuder, Audun, Bolverker, Bragi, Dorunder, Fraugadronten, Fjolnir, Fimboltyr, Galdrafuder, Glappspider, Antabeinir, Helmlindi, Jornringer, Jornunder, Hofnir, Runnater, Svafnir, Sigtrygge, Alfrunder, Vidrerok, Halvfuder, Audun, Bolverker, Bragi, Dorunder, Fraugadronten, Fjolnir, Fimboltyr, Galdrafuder, Glappspider, Antabeinir, Helmlindi, Jornringer, Jornunder, Hofnir, Runnater, Svafnir, Sigtrygge, Valfuder, Vidrerok,
Thank you very much. That was Hungatyr. No encore. Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and listening, hearing me out. My name is Gremnir, and I hope that we'll be crossing paths again soon. Thank you.